Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I'm Vishal, Dahiya, and we're going to talk about the Indian Air Force today, which is celebrating its 88th anniversary. Now we're going to focus on the future plans and challenges as far as Indian Air Force is concerned. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur, Additional Director General of Center for Air Power Studies, is with us. We also have with us retired Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastava, a defense expert, and Mr. Manu, Pubby, Senior Editor, Economic Times. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Rajya Sabha TV. And at the outset, let me congratulate both AVM Manmohan Bahadur and AVM P.K. Srivastava on this occasion. And let's begin, AVM Bahadur, by talking about the journey of Indian Air Force so far.
Thank you for having me, Vishal. And first, it's congratulations to all of us. It is the nation's Air Force. So it's a raising day for all of us. We started 88 years back with very small Vapitis. You saw part of it. People who had seen the parade today at Air Force Station Hindon would have seen the vintage flight in which we had the biplane, yellow in color, doing its paces. And also thereafter came the Dakota. So starting from those piston engine, very rudimentary, but that's what aviation was at those times, the Indian Air Force has graduated over the past almost 9 decades now, graduating from Spitfires, Hurricanes, to thereafter coming on to the jet era with the Vampires. Then came the Oregon from France, Vampires were from the United Kingdom, and then slowly to Mysteries. Till finally in somewhere in actually in 62, we changed over, we got rather the MiG-21 FL the first time. And since then, from then, the Indian Air Force has predominantly been equipped with Russian origin aircraft, both in the transport fleet, the fighter fleet certainly. The transport fleet, we had the IL-14s, followed by then the AN-12s, the IL-76. As also in the rotary wing, the helicopter side, started off initially. We had a few Sikorsky 55 from the US, very few, you could count them on your fingertips. But then the bulk of the fleet was the Mi-4s, the Mi-8s, and the Mi-17 fleets. So gradually we took on, and somewhere in the 80s, 82 to be exact, 82, 83 came in the Jaguars, deep penetration strike aircraft. Then the Mirage 2000s came. Both these aircraft are flying, are frontline fighters for us. And then beginning of this century, actually 1999 onwards, we got the multi-role Sukhois. Sukhoi 30 MKK for the initial squadron, which all converted thereafter to the Sukhoi 30 MKI. I standing for India, because that's got specific instrumentation and avionics for the Indian Air Force. So it's been a long journey. It's been a very fascinating journey for the Indian Air Force. And let's not forget the grounding element in terms of radars, the systems, which we have had a mix of them. You can say the mix is a problem. Yes, as far as the logistics strain is concerned, but that's unfortunately because our industry couldn't catch up. So considering all this, these last 88 years has been a fascinating journey, and I've been fortunate to be part of it for almost 37 years.
Okay, wonderful. Indeed, it has been a glorious and a fascinating journey and history out there. We'll talk about all those aspects, including the integration part as well, which AVM Manmohan Bahadur was referring to. But AVM Srivastava, your views on this glorious journey and glorious past?
So, Vishal, thanks a lot. And a very happy Air Force Day to all of us Indians. That's the first starting thought, as AVM Bahadur also shared. So I'll take the journey forward. You know, when we are looking into, as your topic is, that we are talking about our plans and the future perspective. So let me term this century as a digital century. And there is a spectrum of things which we need to put together, integrate them for us to be the kind of Air Force we want to be. I'm also, kind of inspired by the thought that in this digital century, we have been, a lot of times talking about our technology development and technologies. I see a great green shoot coming up that now we have started talking about product centricity. We know that in digital century, if we want to aggregate our power, be in terms of air logistics, be in terms of maintenance management, be in terms of fighters, or other elements of connecting us on which our orders flow, we need a lot of things to integrate, and it talks about the net-centric warfare. And when you talk about net-centric warfare, you're also talking about two dimensions which will govern us or to strategize whatever we want to procure, which the word we used to use earlier. Okay. Now we have changed that word to acquisition, and that is acquisition of capability. I'm very happy to see that coming up in DAP 20. So if we talk of capability, what actually we are talking about? We are talking about to have such technologies which will put us in the minimum 5th generation kind of fighter aircraft, wherein you need ISA radar. That is the kind of radar you need. You also need IRST. You also need missile approach warning radar. You also need a glass cockpit to have your visuals very clear. You also need helmet mounted display unit with a pilot. You also need very powerful engines to do maneuverability and escape in case there is an attack on you. All this comes up with the stealth combined, then you have the kind of power you need for the fighter aircrafts. But fighter aircraft is the visible part of the Indian Air Force. There is a fleet of transport aircraft. Then you have, helicopters. In helicopters, you have combat helicopters, you have other helicopters, and then you have trainer aircraft, and then you have drone inventory, which we call unmanned aerial vehicles or unmanned combat air vehicles. All these, along with your air defense networks, have to be integrated. They have to become like your wingman in the formations. So all that will be integrated through kind of networks. And when it comes to information technology, fortunately, India has the edge. Why I use the word digital century? In digital century, I think Indian Air Force can have its day. We need to focus on the technology. If you really ask me about technology acquisition, we need to focus on agile software technology where software development cycles have been crunched to 1 to 2 years, which can be given out to the competents in the field. So taking all that into consideration, if you really ask me, there are green shoots in all areas which I mentioned to you. Our policies are falling in place. Our policies in terms of anti-drone policies, which will affect the civil side of the nation also, they need to be combined. So once we have the support of good policies, acquisition has come in place, we can be very confident that we can move into the digital century with very strong steps. But we need to do a lot of things. And that's the challenge Chief also talked about when he said that indigenous equipment, if you really talk about the indigenous equipment, getting into the Indian Air Force, we need a lot of things to do. We really need defense industry, aerospace industry to take off. I think I will wait for the next round of the question.
Definitely.
Because I'll give a pause here. We have a lot of things to do. We can discuss that in the next part of your debate.
Okay, definitely. There are various aspects out there, and all of them will have to be looked into in a very holistic manner. Manu, I'd like to bring you in here, and the tone which has been set there by AVM Srivastava in terms of use of technology as well as the future plans and challenges for the Indian Air Force. So you've been keeping a close watch on the developments in terms of acquisitions, technology development, indigenous development and design as well. So where do we stand right now, specifically from Indian Air Force point of view, and what is it that we need to achieve in short term as well as in long term?
First of all, a very happy Air Force Day to everyone. It's a very good occasion to celebrate, and especially to the two veterans on the panel. Vishal, in a way, the history of the Indian Air Force reflects the trajectory of history that Indian geopolitics took course to. The kind of equipment we have been, operating since independence till now reflects your friends, your allies, your alliances of that moment. And I won't go into the history because I think ABM Bahadur has really put it out very nicely. But India is in a very unique position right now. Today, India is perhaps the only country in the world which has on offer the latest weapon, air force or otherwise technology from the Western world, from Russia, from Israel, from anyone you can speak of except for China, and not that we want any Chinese things, but there's no country in the world which will deny India any technology. So we are at a very, very, very interesting position. Earlier, we had to compromise on certain platforms because we were not given access. After the after the Pokhran tests, for example, we were denied technology on jet engines, and which delayed our indigenous program. All that is a thing of the past. So we are at a very unique position right now. I think the future now, which has been very clearly spelled out by the chief day before yesterday in his annual press conference, is going indigenous. Is developing the next set of fighters, the next set of aircraft in India. And why we focus a lot on fighter jets, because they are the dashing part of the Air Force. There are so many other things that are required. Surface-to-air missile systems. We have really got at a place where I think in the next 10 years we will be fully indigenized there. We will not need to resort to any imports. Helicopters. HAL is undertaking a very, very interesting helicopter development program right now, which could possibly replace all Mi-17 class medium-lift helicopters in the future. Fighters, as the chief spelled out, I think we are looking the next decade as a very, very exciting opportunity for the private sector as well as the public sector. There are two programs which will run. One is the LCA. The chief said it's going to be signed this year for 83 LCA Mark 1As. The next part is the AMCA, the Indian fifth generation fighter. And, that a very innovative model is being used for that, where the private sector will play a leading part. DRDO and HAL will provide scientific and manufacturing know-how. So we are moving into a stage from being a buyer's Air Force, where we used to buy and import everything, to the next decade in which I think we will turn into a maker's Air Force. We will make our own aircraft. We will make our own systems. We will make one of the biggest achievements that we have done, I think, in recent times is the air-to-air missile that we've got. That reduces dependence on a lot of imported, Russian and French equipment, the Astra that we are doing. Mm-hmm. So I think in every aspect of the Air Force in the coming decade, you will see the Indian side delivering more, and that also opens up opportunity for exports in the future. And I think reflected very well by the Air Chief in his conversation recently. I think the whole focus is on Atmanirbhar here, and the spin-off benefits are amazing. The spin-off benefits of aeronautical technology have done wonders to the Western world. They have spin-offs in everything from automobiles to space research to manufacturing technologies. So I think you're looking at an exciting time there. I would like to, of course, get the opinion of the experts from the Air Force a panel to speak on this.
Okay, definitely. This looks like going to be really exciting if you look at that aspect, specifically, indigenization. As ABM Manmohan Bahadur, as Manu is pointing out, and ABM Srivastava also said, we are moving from the buyer's Air Force, to the maker's Air Force sort of phase out there. Focus being on indigenization. What exactly are the challenges there which we need to tackle and ensure that we tackle them, because we are going to be on a timeline?
Lest we get carried away, we need to keep our feet firmly on ground. It's like this. The Air Force is presently on a strength of 30 fighter squadrons. First of all, we are very well off with transport aircraft and helicopters. Our radars, Bharat Electronics Limited has been a success story. So has been certain cases of Bharat Dynamics Limited, of which Srivastava was part of earlier, when he left the Air Force. So there are a few success stories, but there are gaps that we need to be careful of. One gap is the strength of the fighter squadrons. Before we catch up, and it has been said in no uncertain terms, just 7 days back we had a seminar, international seminar, on energizing Indian aerospace, which Center for Air Power Studies held. And there the Deputy Chief was very clear in his statement that we will reach around 37th squadron 37 squadrons in 10 years time frame. So by 2030, we'll be reaching just 37 squadrons. That is provided HAL gets its act together to make sure that the Tejas Mark 1A comes up on time. Incidentally, Mark 1A as a system is yet to fly, and we are going to get 83 of them. So Tejas Mark 1, Tejas Mark 1A, bringing the total to 123, and this 114 fighter contract or project, that is vital, because Tejas Mark II, in fact, we had the Director Aeronautical Development Agency in our conference, in that seminar, and he put forward a timeline saying that it would fly by 2025 or so, and or rolled out in 2025, will fly by 2026. And similarly, the AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, by around 10 years time frame, a 7 to 10 years time frame.
Okay.
Now, these are very ambitious timelines. So we are talking, one, of R&D, and secondly of the production. Now both these have to marry together, and at certain stage of R&D, when confidence is gained, the production line should start coming up. Otherwise, we will go the Tejas way. The Tejas first flew in 2000, and it started entering service only about 3-4 years back. You look at the Chinese, the J-20 flew in 4 years' time. In 4 years' time, from the first flight, it was inducted into squadron service. Now, that's a different concept that they're following, but it's better to learn from our past follies. So, we need to have our feet firmly on ground. For the next few years, I feel that there would be indigenous buy of Tejas, and there has to be an import. Because where do you make up your squadron strength? Because in certain time frame, the Mirage 2000s will start phasing out, and so would be the case with the Jaguars and the earlier versions of the MiG-29.
Okay.
So there would be import for the next 10 years while our indigenous industry comes up. Hopefully, finances would be available. That is something which in COVID times, one keeps our fingers crossed. The finances have to be found from somewhere to do all these huge pursuits. And as Manu rightly brought out, we are going there in terms of missiles.
Okay.
And the plethora of missiles that have been tried out literally in the past month and a half, I hope it goes beyond the prototype stage to in the R&D phase to next to the production stage. And this should not just become a PR exercise. Let's be blunt, many a times this has been the case. It has not seen production. That's where the whole nation depends on DRDO, on ADA, on HAL, and BEL, BDL, because these are our prime and only agencies. All power to them for them to bring up.
Okay. Okay, definitely, and that's a correct sum up there. Would you agree, AVM Srivastava, that for the next few years it'll have to be a mix of focus on indigenization, but we will also have to meet the shortfall from the imports, and therein comes the real important role to be played by the industry, both the private as well as the public sector, domestic defense industry.
So primarily, I'll put our strategy into 3 parts. The first part is how do we get our number of squadrons for the fighters which we need. That is a very important part. And I really share the concern of AVM Bahadur that getting that kind of technology into a production mode, I have been in the production business directly, would be a very, very challenging task, because you need to build up the defense industrial base in a very, very big way. Okay, so MMRCA 2.0 has to come up in time and has to augment, even if we have to meet those 37 squadrons kind of aspiration which we have, while we pursue alongside LCA and MCA with the ambitious timelines which we have. Coming to weapons, which are very important part, without weapons will not be an Indian Air Force or the Air Force, fighting Air Force. Weapons area, I can pass on a little bit of comfort that yes, if we have done the technology demonstrator, the kind of we have done, the industrial base for the missiles is really in place. It's not so much out of the place.
Okay.
And we can do that production very quickly because we have the experience of so many missiles in terms of strategic, ATGMs, surface-to-air missiles, And we have the experience, wherewithal, and the kind of expertise and systems So I wouldn't be so fearful about the missile part of it, which are coming up, whether be it BrahMos, be it in terms of Nirbhay, Astra, and all that. Once we have honed the technology, we'll be able to produce in the numbers which we need. Definitely not so for the fighter aircraft. Now, coming back to other systems, which we talked about, the digital century, we are also in place. If you look at the Indian Air Force, it has done a great job of having its logistics online, that is in terms of EMALS. It has also done a very beautiful job in terms of IACCS. I'm really gung-ho about it. That means all my sensors can feed and I can just move the data on platform. Also, I have done maintenance management system online. I've got FNet online. So with all that being in place and the pieces falling in place, I need to integrate, but I definitely need ODN, Operational Digital Link, with the AVAC, which is flying in the sky, to have my eyes and my things being transmitted. Apart from that, I think there's a great need. Of course, I heard the sentiment of our Honorable Prime Minister about AI, non-weaponization of AI. But I recently witnessed one DARPA program where they had a virtual environment created in which they flew virtual aircraft F-16 through manual pilots, and they also flew through AI. And I was shocked to see in a 5-0 kind of conflict, AI hit 5-0. That means an AI-driven aircraft, F-16, was able to hit the best of the ace pilots, and they couldn't score a single hit.
Okay.
So that's going to be a concern. We are good in information technology. We need to develop it. We need to be having there. Another thing which bothers me is space deterrence. We talk about commercial exploitation and peaceful use of space. Everything is fine. But unless you have credible space deterrence in terms of ASATs and hypersonic, we flew the hypersonic technology demonstrator, those kinds of things that needs to be developed. It's a work in motion, it's a work in process.
Okay.
It is not a done thing. We need to be concentrating on that so that we really have aerospace force. We don't want to use ab initio space for offense purposes, but we should have credible space deterrence available there. Those terms will say, yes, we need to be mixing both our acquisitions and our indigenous development, and we need to race up through the indigenous development. The policies need to be built so that they support fully. And those policies are coming up. I am not so disheartened. A lot of policies have come up which are kind of promoting IPR. I was very concerned once upon a time that if somebody works with DPSU for let's say a period of 20-30 years during the development of Akash missile, that industry doesn't get, if it's a private industry, doesn't get any IPR rights over it. You again go for tendering. So who will come forward when nobody knows what is the future is? And one thing I always say and remember what an American strategist said: if you don't know what the threat is, because we really don't know what the threat is going to be from our adversaries who are close by, be the threat. You have to be the threat yourself so that they don't try to take advantage of a position.
Okay. Clearly out there, between both AVM Srivastava and AVM Manmohan Bahadur, they've spelt out the challenges and the way it can be tackled. Manu, would you agree, as both the gentlemen are pointing out, that the focus obviously has to be indigenization, but in the short term, you can't rule out a mix of, indigenous manufacturing as well as import acquisitions?
No, there is no doubt about that you need to, imbibe foreign technology. And the 114 program that the two gentlemen have discussed, that is also being processed under an indigenous system of procurement. So when that aircraft does come in, and I'm very hopeful it will, the chief has spelled it out as some of the top priorities of the Air Force to buy 114 medium weight multi-role combat aircraft. But they will be made in India. So they will also be falling under the categorization of Make in India. So, they will involve transfer of technology to the private sector. They will involve a transfer of manufacturing technology. And all of the technology that comes in through that program is going to be used up into our other programs like the AMCA or, future versions of the LCA or a naval fighter that we are trying to build up. So it will be a mix. We can't be isolated and think that we want to develop AMCA and all future aircraft and helicopters indigenously without any foreign help. There is no element of doubt at all that we will require foreign help, and a lot of it. And the future will be a public-private partnership model. in which whatever research efforts are available in the country will be provided by DRDO, HAL, or ADA, and the remaining, be it 50% or 20% or 10%, depending on the program, will have to be taken in from abroad, most likely through a private sector entity, because they are more agile in their ability to absorb technology, to negotiate price better. So I think that is the model that we are looking at in the next 10 years. We will be getting a foreign origin aircraft, which I hope which is the last foreign origin aircraft to be in service with the Air Force, a manned aircraft at least. But that will also be, I categorize that also as a Make in India program.
Okay.
I think that's the approach that the government is taking. The future, of course, as we know, is going to be drones and, unmanned warfare. Now, for that, we are, I think, a bit behind the rest of the world when it comes to technology development. And that is where we need to do a lot of focus. And for that, we might need to do imports in the coming few years also.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Manu, for sharing your views, as well as AVM Srivastava and AVM Manmohan. Bahadur, as our panelists point out clearly, these are some of the challenges as well as future plans and goals for the Indian Air Force. Obviously, we will have to put our act together as far as focus words, key focus words are concerned, that is indigenization as well as development of technology, and also working on TOT aspect. Once again, before we bring this to an end, many congratulations to all Indians on Indian Air Force Day. We'll come back again next week with a different topic. Till then, you keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.